We're back with Person of Interest. This is Season 1, Episode 4. It is called Cura Te Ipsum. I might have butchered the pronunciation of that, but welcome back. Excited to be back to the show. This episode's got a fairly big guest star, Linda Cardinelli, who people might know her as Hawkeye's wife. I know she was on Freaks and Geeks. She was in the Scooby-Doo movies. And I'm sure she was in was it Grey's Anatomy she was in? I'm sure she was in like a medical show. She was in a medical show for a long time. But she's in here. She's the person of interest, the quote unquote. And she's a doctor who is overworking. She's working all the time. She seems to care about her patients. But she's also kind of got this double life thing going on, which leads to why her number's up. So there's a lot to like about this episode. I think obviously some seeds are being planted and things are being brought together a little bit, particularly with Carter and Fusco by the end of the episode, where they both have their own thing throughout this episode. Fusco probably more so, but by the end it's like, oh, they're going to be in the same like plot line now, effectively. They're going to be together, not necessarily as partners, but he's sitting right next to her now. That's kind of because Carter keeps looking into them. That's the plan from Reese to maybe try and keep tabs on her, is to have Fusco as a spy keeping tabs on her. So that stuff's exciting. It's exciting to sort of progress some of that stuff. It's kind of a fun moment because it doesn't tell you don't know that's his plan until he's there, and then Carter walks into the scene and he's like, oh, I guess you're stuck with me. And even Fusco at this point doesn't even really know why he's there, I don't think. Or if he does, he has the bare minimum. I'm sure all of the details are something that are going to come to him in the first few days of him doing this. That said, though, he did ask about the case she was looking into, so maybe he's already got an idea of what he's there for. But yeah, so that stuff's exciting. I think actually sticking with Fusco for a minute, I really liked how there's two things I liked about his stuff this episode. One was at the start of the episode when Reese wants to look into the history of the potential bad guy in the main plot. There's like a redacted police record of his background, and he needs to get it. And he's like, "Oh, I'll go and talk to Fusco." And Finch is concerned because he's not really comfortable with working with someone like Fusco. So it sets up this idea that that this is like a ticking time clock, that maybe this relationship isn't sustainable. Finch is uncomfortable with it. Reese is like, no, I'll go use him. And I think what I liked about this transition to Fusco's first scene is that the very next scene, it cuts to Fusco, and you expect Reese to show up because he's playing hockey with his son, and you think, oh, Reese is going to pop up just like he's done before. So it was almost like a mini little twist when it was someone else, when it was someone separate from Reese who Fusco's going to have kind of his own plot with, effectively. And it's basically just drug dealers who were tied to like the other corrupt cops before, and because Fusco's the last one left standing, they want their money from him. But I like that it came up with a problem for him, because then this is the other thing I liked about Fusco's plot this episode, is that I like that there's consequences for what his life was before, that it's not just this squeaky transition into what his new role is. There are still these lingering after effects. It's not something that needs to be there, but I think it adds a bit of weight to like who he was before, and the fact that this is something that we're still going to have to deal with. And then of course the potential from that is that Reese might have to help him with it. And I was thinking that as soon as it came up, I'm like, oh, he's going to have to ask Reese for help. Reese is going to have to save his ass, and maybe some bonding will happen. And what's interesting is by the end of the episode, that doesn't happen. He does ask Reese for help, and Reese kinda helps. Like he does beat the guys up, but he's doing it because he needs all their drugs to frame the other guy in the main plot. And he actually ends up getting Fusco in more trouble because now they want even more stuff from him. And that's something that's there. And then he threatens the cartel guy with like some knowledge that might keep them away for a bit, right? Maybe they'll pop up again. It's hard to say right now. But it was never like, oh, I'm going to go and help my buddy Fusco. I'm not going to make sure he's okay so he can keep helping me. Reese's line this episode to Lionel is very much, I can replace you with any other corrupt cop because there's tons of you. So it's not really that big a deal to me if they kill you. I'll just move on. And it feels quite cold, almost to the point where I think you actually feel a little bit bad for him. Where he really is, like, the cartel's coming after him. They want, was it $2 million from him, which he obviously does not have. And his, like, badass guy who he's not friends with per se, but, he's associated with right now, is not helping him. He's hanging him out to dry. And then by the end of the episode, it's like, no, you're doing this other thing for me now. Now you're going to keep an eye on Carter. You're going to make sure her investigation into me, presumably does not actually lead to anything. That is seemingly the goal. So I enjoyed this plot because of those things added to that relationship, but also just I think it was fun how it was like, oh, I'm going to go see Fusco, and because we've seen Reese pop up in his scenes, like a Batman in the backseat of his car, or popping up when he doesn't expect him, it was kind of almost a nice little surprise that it was someone else, and it was like, oh, it's not just the same thing again, which I guess fundamentally is one of the key things I like about it, is that it's shaking things up already. We're not just doing the exact same thing yet again. Not that I think it needed to shake it up yet, but already it's like playing with my expectations as far as the structure of the episodes go and what I expect from the next scene. So the fact that it's already doing little things like that in the structure and writing to spice it up, I think is really smart and shows a lot of confidence early on. So that's cool. And speaking of Carter, she is looking at footage from last episode with the robbery at the the evidence locker, and notices that Finch talked to Reese, right, and goes to speak to him about that, and it all looks a bit fishy. And Finch plays his part. He doesn't admit to talking to him until she shows him the photo, which does look a little bit suspicious, and her demeanor definitely changes in the scene. I think the acting from Henson was good here, because it's like immediately she had this kind of judgmental, like, okay, before I was the friendly cop, now I'm like looking at you with the eye, like you're up to something. But I mean, everything Finch says sounds plausible enough in the context, but that's obviously what leads them to wanting to deal with Carter in some way. But obviously not anything bad, not like take her out or anything like that, because she's a good person, she's a good character. She's not one of the scumbags that can just be taken out for obvious reasons. So all that's going on. As far as Finch goes, there's not a ton of Finch stuff this episode. There's no flashbacks this episode either. Finch has a little moment where he denies like what his motivations are again when it comes up. And this episode is largely about motivations, because the main plot's all about what the main character's motivation is for getting after this guy. But I also say that Finch has a little involvement as well. Again, he's actually, right at the very start of the episode, he's at the hospital to sort of interact with the character, Dr. What's her name? Megan Tillman. I'll just call her Megan from henceforth. He's there to like swap out her pager, so they can track her and so on and so on. But again, it's him in the field. It's him doing some stuff that's maybe more believable. And maybe it is because he's a smaller, meek man who has this limp. It's very easy for people to trust him, or at the very least not see him as a threat. And maybe that's why he's good for that type of mission. And that's interesting. So totally, this episode does something super cool, which is right at the start. We hear like a female voice, and it's like an answering machine message, and it plays out over the security camera footage and stuff of the city. But it's got sad music behind it, and it's like, it sounds like she's upset, and she's saying, "I've realized now this is my fault." And you hear a few lines, and I actually completely forgot about it until it came back in and did it again in the middle of the episode, and I went, "Oh yeah, this was at the start." And it's kind of this recurring thing until you eventually get what it is. And what it is the main character of this episode, Megan. Her sister was sexually assaulted in college. She was roofied, raped, and eventually committed suicide as a knock-on effect of that. And the twist of the episode, which, when it's like, what's it really about, right? Because, for a while, Reese is following Megan, and it's like, okay, she's this dedicated doctor. Oh, she goes to the club every night until 3 a.m., even though she starts work at 6 a.m. Like, what is she doing? And she's never like, going home with anyone. She's never really interacting with anyone. She's just kind of shooing away everyone. All she's doing is sitting at the bar and drinking until it's time to go home. But then the twist eventually comes that she's waiting for this, like her target. Because we effectively get a moment where she starts doing what Reese does, where Reese follows her, and then she pulls out a big camera and is spying on like the guy, on like was it Benton, the guy who raped her sister, and he's watching, and it's almost like the I don't want to say Inception, because it's that. But I'm saying it's like it's someone spying on someone spying. It's a spy within the spy, is what I'm trying to say. But we get our cheesy like go to commercial one-liner, which is he's not stalking her, she's stalking him, which is technically true. But I will say I did think that was a weird way to phrase it, given it's very clear that, like, well, you could call what she's doing stalking. She is literally following and taking photos, which is, yes, stalking. But it comes off more like what Reese's does, where it's more about, like, surveillance, and it feels more organized and planned, rather than just someone, like, following a victim, necessarily, even though he is a victim of her, potentially. It felt a lot more organized than that. So I get why they wanted the catchy line where he just flips it around, but it did sound it's not completely fitting the vibe of what's going on, I would say. But obviously it's a fun way to shake things up. It's I think all of the episodes so far have really played with this idea of, is the person that's we're following, are they the victim, are they the perpetrator? And depending on which one of those, like, in what way are they the victim or perpetrator? So this was a case where technically the person we're following is the perpetrator, but she's also the sympathetic one. Like, throughout this episode, you never sympathize with the victim of this potential crime because he's the bad guy. He's the one who did something wrong. This episode's more about morality and more about stopping someone from killing someone because it will change them. That Rishi's whole thing this episode is to stop her from losing that part of herself. And he knows what it's like to lose that part of himself because he's been killing people for years. Like, it's very much something he knows about. In fact, the ending of the episode, like, even... There's almost that, obviously this is years before the expanse, but there's almost that I'm that guy kind of like feeling to the last couple of scenes where it's like maybe he'll just kill him for her instead. Because this guy, it's not just like he did it once either. Like, it's made very clear that he is a serial rapist, that he is doing this and he keeps photos of all of his victims. He is someone who does this over and over again and gets away with it. He's this Wall Street guy who just does it repeatedly and obviously gets off on it and loves doing it, and he's going to keep hurting people. So it's like you're kind of like on the side of like, yeah, just take him out, like, or at the very least scare the shit out of him so much that he will never even look at another person again. But that's not the only thing the ending reminds me of, though. I also got, funnily enough, when we started this show, I was talking about how people said this was like Batman if Batman like was split into two characters. The ending of this is very Batman the Killing Joke, actually, where it doesn't actually give us the answer if Reese kills him or not. It leaves in a cliffhanger that I don't think we're going to come back to. I don't think we'll ever find out if he killed him. I think this is, by design, is supposed to be we have to make up our own minds if he killed him or not, as he's sitting there blubbering, begging not to be killed, and swearing that he can change. And it's the sort of thing where there's like real life mentality and there's like TV mentality, and I think when I'm watching a TV show, I am bloodthirsty and I am like, kill him, like, just do it. Slowly even. So yeah, I guess I hope he did. Well, he had it coming. I think it's pretty safe to say. And I'm joking around, but in that scene, Reese even says something to the effect of, like, he's lost that good part of himself a long time ago, but maybe he can do things that other people can't. He can do the things that good people shouldn't have to, which kind of fits into the whole idea of the type of character that he is that he's there to step in and be the Dark Knight when, everything else fails. But it also raises the question of, like, our two main characters are these characters who are broken. They are people with motivations where bad things have happened in their past. Finch's is very mysterious. Reese is a bit more known to us at this point. But by having a character who something bad happened to someone they cared about, right? You know, Megan's sister was this original victim that has motivated her thing. It does make you think that it ties in perhaps to with Finch as, you know, we know he had, you know, the friend the busters of in the building who was like the face of his company or whatever before. Like is he that to him? Is he the sister of that story where his demise is what's motivated Finch? It feels like, you know, you can maybe draw some parallels or, you know, allusions to that based on just what we know so far. And, you know, because the question always is how does the main story like impact our main character, or how does it reflect our main characters? I feel like the show's smart enough so far that every story we've had in some way does reflect upon some element of our two main characters and why they do what they do. So I think this episode, especially since the whole show is about two guys who are going outside the law to like solve problems that they're not supposed to. And you can maybe even argue, are they being a little hypocritical for stopping this woman from killing someone who, you know, let's face it, deserves it? But obviously, it's never about should he be stopped, right? That's not even the question. Even Finch says, I think this guy is going to keep doing what he does. And at one point even says to Reese, maybe maybe her killing him is doing the world a favor. Like almost proposing, should we even stop her? And it's Reese who says, no, we do stop her because that'll change her. And I think it's notable that Reese is the one who says that because Finch presumably has never directly killed someone, so he wouldn't have that insight the way Reese does. So he just kind of proposes, oh, maybe we should just let her kill him. And Reese is the one who says, no, because that will change her. It shouldn't be her. If someone's going to do it, then maybe I can step in. I'll be that guy. But it shouldn't be her. Also, at one point, he follows, or he finds like this like sort of second house she's like sort of got ready for the crime. And the closet's full of like something that'll dissolve a body. And there's a little dark joke where Reese just instantly knows what it's for, and Finch is like, I'm not going to ask how you know that. And all I could think in my head was, well, he watched season 1 of Breaking Bad, which was already out in 2011. Breaking Bad started in 2008, so he could have been watching Breaking Bad. Now, I'm not saying it's the exact same substance, but there was a very early episode of Breaking Bad about dissolving a body in a bathtub. So I'm just saying, I thought of Breaking Bad when that came up. Yeah, I mean, as far as everything else in the episode, the actual, you know, like seeing the actual stuff play out where she like, comes in and zaps him, I kind of appreciated that she left nothing to chance, and it was never down to like trying to overpower this guy. Not that he's like a big muscly guy or anything, but there was nothing left to, oh, I actually have to fight him. She came in and tased him. She had drugs at the ready, like a breather mask to like pump him full of stuff just to keep him out. Like there was nothing left to like he's strapped to a wheelchair. And she's a doctor. She knows exactly how to keep him under the entire time, and it gives us this chance. And one of the things that with McKenna doing throughout these episodes as well, which I guess I have to talk about here, is how Reese eventually interacts with like the main person. There was a lot of it in the last episode with the gang, obviously, and the thieves, because he was like getting into the team, so there was a lot of like infiltration. This reminded me more back of the first couple episodes where it's a bit more like he's following her and just sort of keeping a distance for a while, but eventually he'll kind of like enter the scene as a stranger so he can talk to the person a little bit. And he does it here at like a support group meeting where they're listening to a victim of sexual assault, and he tries to get some conversation going with her. I appreciate like some details in scenes like this in the show so far. Like, it didn't try to spell things out to me. It just, like, she gives her fake name, because she gave a fake name to what was his name, Benton, the bad guy. She gave a fake name to him when she met him at the club, and that scene happened already. So when we get to this scene, and Reese goes up and says, hey, I'm John, and just starts, talking to her in a casual way, and she gives the name Kate, you instantly recognize that was the name she gave the bad guy as well, and that she's not leaving anything to chance here, where she's it tells us a couple of things about her. It tells us that she's really closed off as well, I suppose, in general, because there's not even a reason why she has to lie at this meeting. So it says something about her that she's lying here too, when she doesn't have to. Like, you get why she's using a fake name for the victim, and why she used this fake name to like get this second like house and stuff. Like, everything she's going to do with the crime, it makes sense why she's got an alias. But the fact she's even doing this when someone's trying to just talk to her about, you know, why they're there at this support group meeting, which is about her pain, about her past, about why she feels this way, she's, you know, closing up. And I think it's a simple little writing trick that says a lot about the character, which I think good shows that are pretty episodic, where you've got like a new character to focus on every episode, like this show does, I think it's one of the little tricks they can do to give them a bit more depth than you would typically get in a one-off character, which, that, you know, by all accounts, this is a one-off character, you know, unless someone's, you know, she surprisingly returns later in the season or something. So I want to applaud that a little bit, because I think one of the failings of writing on episodic TV is that a lot of characters who are there for one episode do feel quite weak and throwaway compared to your regular characters. And it makes sense, because you want to give your regular characters the most time and attention. They're the hooks, they're the things that are keeping us coming back. But the individual stories each week will matter a lot less if we don't buy into what those are. And I think, by and large, the average so far, I mean, we're only 4 episodes in, but by and large, it has been a little better, I would say, than typical TV, because of little things like that, where that little choice to have her lie when she didn't need to just gave us a bit more insight into the character. It made us go, oh, she's lying, why is that? And it gets your brain thinking just a little bit, not much, just a little bit, just to give it a little bit depth. Obviously, casting a good guest star is also helpful, naturally. So, main plot was good. I liked that it was dealing more with the morality of stopping a good person from doing something bad than it was just saving them from a bad person. And then having Reese come in at the end and basically be forced to make a choice where he's going to just kill the guy anyway, because he is awful and he should be stopped. But and maybe this is something that we can return to later, where right now Reese clearly doesn't think he's a good person. He thinks of himself as a bad guy who's just doing things to try and maybe redeem himself, or try and, like, you know, balance the scales of atonement or whatever. And maybe this is something like this question can come back up as we go through the show of, at what point does he realize that he isn't a bad guy, or someone else tries to convince him that he is just a good person? You know, he does a lot of bad things and he's able to step in and do a lot of bad things, but the fact that he's so determined to step in and help people is something that makes him inherently kind of good. And I wonder if this is something we'll see over the course of the show, or maybe this is a sort of decision that maybe later in the show he won't make the same choice, assuming he does make the choice to kill him, which again is left ambiguous. We don't actually know for sure. I think I'm leaning towards that he did. It makes the most sense to me. I think at this point he is maybe a cold character who is willing to just kill this guy. Not without empathy and sympathy, and, you know, obviously cares about others. He cares about innocent people. He cared about Megan this episode. That very idea that he's stepping in to try and, like, save her soul, if you will, by doing the killing instead, shows that. But maybe this is something that he will be less willing to do in the future. That said, though, I'm not suggesting that I think he will not want to kill anyone later in the show, because that also might get in the way of a lot of situations that he gets into. But no, now, solid 4th episode. I think it advanced the both cops' stories into an interesting place, where I think them being separate for a few episodes was smart, because it set them both up so they both feel like individual characters and they both feel like they've got their own thing, but it ultimately makes them being together now a lot more exciting. Like, I really can't emphasize enough just how exciting it was to see, oh wait, they're going to be in the same plot lines now. That actually was a little thrill. It was like, and I think it's quite smart when you do that. And clearly, we're so early on that was always the intention. That was always going to be where this goes with these two characters. And you could have totally reworked the pilot so they were already in the same precinct. They were already close to each other and just running off and doing their own things. But this little moment where you realize that this is intentionally putting them together is quite, quite thrilling in a low key way, but thrilling all the same. So there you go. That is episode 4 of Person of Interest. I'll be back next week with episode 5. So look forward to that. And of course, if you do enjoy the reviews, do hit the like button. It helps us out a lot. It really does. So it's a simple click. Go do it. And of course, if you want to support the show financially, you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us with a bit of monies every month and help keep all the content coming. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?